Welcome to the Solo Mo Show, a weekly podcast hosted by Corey O'Brien, the social media strategist at Heat and author of thefutureofads.com.
And I'm Adam Helway, CEO of digital marketing agency Secret Sushi Creative.
Each episode, we discuss the intersection of social, local, and mobile. Our goal is to help you understand these topics so you can integrate them into your marketing and advertising. Today is February 21st, 2012, and this is episode number 7. So Adam, how's it going?
You know, man, it's going all right. I think I need to start a new entry in my things not to do before the podcast notebook.
Uh-oh, what's going in there today?
Well, my wife ate a little light today, so she wanted to go out to dinner, and so she chose to go to a buffet. And you know how you feel sometimes when you get a little over in indulgence at the buffet, and then suddenly you sit down to have a podcast, and you just want to make sure that you don't end up, you know,
taking a nap mid-show?
Taking a nap, you know, any accidental burps on the microphone, any of that kind of stuff, you know.
Oh, yeah. Well, if I hear anything, I'll just start yelling into the microphone and that'll wake you up. So.
Yeah, that'll make the podcast that much better.
There you go.
Burping and yelling simultaneously.
Oh, yeah. Very enjoyable. Nice. Yeah, we call that a food coma, I believe, when you've eaten so much that you just want to sleep.
Yeah, if I suddenly start snoring, you know why.
I'll know what's up, exactly. So yesterday was President's Day. A couple folks got it off. I did as well. I got a chance to take a day off of work. What about yourself? Did you get to take a break?
Well, you know, there's always something to do. I mean, like if you could add a couple more hours to the day, there would be stuff to do at that time. But what ends up happening during the holidays, because I thought it was funny, a few folks that I talked to, including some clients, were like, "Oh, so you observe that day?" It's like, no, I don't necessarily observe that day, but I take advantage of that day. If there are fewer emails, you know, if people are off doing their own little vacations and stuff, you have to do what you can at that time to rest and to relax a little bit. I still didn't find myself just completely zoning out. I ended up instead, you know, starting my workday a little bit later in the day and then sitting in front of, I think, Netflix in my living room with my laptop on my lap for probably, I think by the time I realized it was still probably 8 to 10 hours of sitting there answering emails and writing some things up and stuff. So I guess you get a little bit more done simply because you don't have all the distractions of the bevy of emails that usually get tossed at your phone calls and such.
Definitely, yeah. I used the sort of fake day off, but day off to catch up on a couple of different side projects I've been working on and wrote a couple blog posts and actually prepared for today's show. So despite being a day off, I still got quite a bit of work in, but you know, it's all enjoyable. And sometimes it's good to catch up on those projects you've got on the back burner. So no complaints here.
Yeah. And with that said, man, I mean, Corey, of the two of us has been really kicking butt when it comes to just like putting the content up on the site, putting the content up on YouTube, and doing a number of other things, you know, because the whole show is recorded on his side. And I wish, you know, I'd love to say we were fighting over it, but he just went ahead and dove in and said, "Look, I'll take care of this on this end." And so he's really been the steward of that content and putting it at all the right places and such. And you know, I'll just thank him publicly for making that stuff happen each and every week when we have the show.
Hey, no worries. I appreciate the compliments, but I don't mind at all. I actually quite enjoy it.
Cool. You guys heard him say that. He said we got it recorded.
There you go. It's public record now. Nice. Well, speaking of people that kick butt, we actually had our first guest for the episode today. And though we didn't have it live just to make sure that we got the recording done well, we did have a chance to have a chat with Jason Falls of Social Media Explorer. And had Jason on and got to ask him quite a few questions about his no BS approach to social marketing. So wanted to share that with you guys, and hopefully it's something that you'll enjoy. And we're looking forward to having additional guests on the show. So keep an eye out for that as well. But what we wanted to do now is just dive into a conversation with Jason Falls.
So this week on the Solo Mo Show podcast, we're doing something a little bit different. We have our first guest ever, and this guest is somebody that's familiar to me. His name is Jason Falls, and He is the author and proprietor at Social Media Explorer, one of the top social media and digital marketing blogs on the planet. I happen to have had the lucky opportunity to be contributing to Social Media Explorer as one of the team of authors that they've got there on the staff. And Jason doesn't know this very much, but there's a lot of things that I've learned from him over the last couple of years in participating with Social Media Explorer. And actually, I had the opportunity to work with Jason on a couple projects in the past, and I really like his style, which we'll get into in just a little bit for digital marketing and social media. But just some other quick background about Jason is that he originally came from a large, longstanding PR agency, one of the oldest in the country, and made his way into starting his own consultancy, which we'll talk about again in just a second. And he has a few other things going on, but he's also the author of a book that was published latter end of last year called No Bullshit Social Media. And again, we'll have to get into the story behind that in a little bit in just a second. How you doing, Jason?
I'm doing great, Adam, man. Thanks to you and Corey for having me. This is awesome to be on the show.
Well, cool. And you're actually out here. We're on the West Coast, and you're out on the West Coast today as well, right?
Yeah, I'm based in Louisville, Kentucky, but I came out today to Seattle, Washington, to pay a visit to Visible Technologies, my friends here, and the Social Media Club Seattle folks. So hanging out on West Coast time this week.
Yeah, it's unusual. I think we probably wouldn't have been able to get you on here had it been the regular time. You'd be out chilling with the kids and stuff. I know you're good about making sure to have time with the family and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we probably could have made it work. I mean, it's 11:20 or so our time as we record this live. So the kids would probably be well in bed by now, but we would have made it work, especially for you, man. Appreciate it.
Cool. I appreciate it as well. So, I mentioned it at the start here. You used to work for, and it's correct. It was one of the oldest PR agencies in the U.S., right?
Yeah, Doe Anderson is the name of the agency I worked for. I was there for 4 years, and they are at the time they were the fifth oldest, and they're actually not just a PR agency; they're an advertising agency, fifth oldest advertising agency in the country. They were founded in 1915 by I believe it was Elmer Doe and Wilbur Anderson, for some good old fashioned names for you there. And it's one of the oldest continuously owned and operated, privately held, privately owned or employee owned ad agencies in the country, and they're still in Louisville. They still do a great job. I love the folks there. Todd Spencer's their CEO, and very loyal to those folks. They gave me a great opportunity to kind of blossom into the social media world, and really enjoyed the time I had there.
And you actually kind of slipped into the interactive side of things, right? I mean, before you were doing PR, and then I remember what rumor has it that you just kind of slipped into that gig a while back, right?
Yeah, I've been a public relations guy for a long time. For 12 years, I spent time with people called the sports information world, college sports information directors out there, who are basically the PR guys for college athletics. So college football, college basketball, all those coaches and whatnot, they were my primary clients. And I worked as the internal PR guy for college athletic departments for a long time. And got out of that business in 2005, 2006, when my son was born, and realized I was traveling a lot and missing my son's, childhood. And so my wife and I moved back to Louisville, got a job at Doe Anderson as a PR account manager, probably primarily because I had a sports background. One of my first assignments was to do PR for Louisville Slugger, which was one of Doe Anderson's, main clients there in the PR realm. And then, had a couple of other assignments as well. But Doe Anderson has a 40-plus year, we're probably working on 45 to 50-year history now as the agency of record for Maker's Mark Bourbon. And I started out as a PR account manager there, and I started looking around, and because I'd run a blog, I had a personal blog, and it was just where I tried to be funny is all it was. It wasn't a serious blog. But I've been blogging and I've been on social networks and whatnot for a while. And so when I got to Doe Anderson, I looked around and started talking to my colleagues there at Doe saying, hey, why aren't we talking to our clients about social media, blogging, social networking, et cetera? And nobody really understood what I was talking about. But Todd Spencer, the CEO, he actually became the CEO while I was there. And Dave Wilkins, the CEO prior to Todd, both said to me, hey, man, if you can sell it, you can do it. And so they gave me the power to say, come up with social media ideas and take them to Maker's Mark and take them to, Central Bank, which is a bank in Kentucky, and take them to the different clients we have. And if they like them, then you've got a new job. And so I started advising these clients and giving them some ideas in the social media world, and they liked it, they took it, and they rolled with it. And I give a lot of credit to Sam Seiler, who was the brand manager for Maker's Mark at the time, and who basically said, Jason, I like your ideas. Let's take a few of them to market and see what happens. And she allowed me to, push the envelope a little bit in the spirits industry, which is a very heavily regulated industry. And that sort of brought me some national attention because I was doing something in an industry that wasn't innovative in this space. And I was doing some things with national brands that weren't being done at the time. This is 2006, 2007. And so I just kind of rode that wave and rode it for all it was worth, I guess.
Well, and speaking of, 2006, 2007, social media at that point, I mean, maybe even a number of years after, was still trying to kind of identify its business presence. Like, how was it going to make people money or kind of find its position in the business world? So it wasn't, I mean, it was only 2 years ago or so that you then kind of took the leap and decided to go solo and start your own consultancy, right?
Exactly. It was 2011 when I left Doe Anderson, or I'm sorry, 2009 when I left Doe Anderson, and went out on my own. And it was really more because I had sort of created a monster at Doe Anderson, in that we brought on a couple of social media managers who were doing a lot of strategy work for clients. I had been promoted a couple times, and I was at the time vice president for Interactive, I think was my title at Doe. And so I had all the developers and whatnot working under me, and I was doing a lot of new business pitches. I was doing a lot of managing of the team, which was great, but it wasn't what I was really good at. And what I was really good at was developing social strategy for people. And so I wanted to get back to doing that. Went out on my own and started my own consultancy. And so my blog, my personal blog, or rather my business blog at the time, Social Media Explorer, which was always mine, not necessarily Doe Anderson's, became my company. And Social Media Explorer was incorporated and, became an LLC. And I started taking on individual client work and whatnot, and went out on my own. And so in 2011, I actually expanded that a little bit and went out, and there was a local guy in Louisville named Aaron Marshall who had his own consultancy, who was doing CEO coaching, a lot of digital marketing consulting, things like that. And basically Aaron and I decided we wanted to basically go to bat together. And so from a technical aspect, it doesn't really mean a whole lot, but Social Media Explorer acquired Texmo, which was his company. And basically he came on as a full partner at Social Media Explorer. And now we're sort of taking on the world together and doing client consulting. We're also doing events. We're also doing an online learning community. And we try to help individual and businesses understand digital marketing a little bit better and implement it for their gain. And in the process, hopefully, we make a little bit of money on the side too.
Well, let's go ahead and jump into the book. So you mentioned a lot of different things, but there's a book, No Bullshit Social Media, released the latter half of last year. And anybody that knows you and that's heard you speak on the topic would say that that's probably a perfect title for you. But why'd you name the book No Bullshit Social Media?
Yeah, so and it's appropriate that you lead into that saying it's an appropriate title for me, because the reason that we named the book that was because for several years, I mean, I've been speaking publicly and have been a professional public speaker since probably 2008, I guess, is when I first did my first sort of national conference kind of thing.
And you were on
And
radio before that, right? I mean, a long time ago, you were doing radio.
Yeah, I've done radio before, so I have a broadcasting background, so on and so forth. But the public speaking thing, every time I came off stage when I was talking about social media, or every time I did a workshop or a boot camp or a webinar or whatnot, there was inevitably one person in the crowd or two people in the crowd who would say, "Man, I really like your style. You cut straight to it. You don't beat around the bush. You're kind of a no BS kind of guy." And I just heard that over and over again. And I thought, well, if I'm hearing that as feedback from the people that I'm talking to or the people that are giving me feedback, then it must resonate. It must mean something. And so when we started talking about, when Eric Deckers, who's my co-author on the book, when we started talking about the book and what we wanted to say, that vibe was there. It was like we really want to cut to the chase, and we want to cut out the BS that people here know, that you can use this for business, that you can measure it, that you can talk about ROI and not be ashamed of it, and this can be a real business driver for your company. And so when we started talking about the titles, it was like, well, no bullshit. Social media just resonates. It rings true. The only real question after we sort of came to that conclusion was, A, will the publisher like it? And then as we talked to the publisher, we realized that it was, B, will the retailers like it? Will the Barnes & Nobles and the Books A Millions and will the Amazons of the world consider it appropriate and not sort of ding us for having a swear word on the title? And every single one of them fell in line and said, no, we actually like it. It's actually catchy and good and clever. And if there's anybody that objects to it, we're willing to deal with that. And so they let it slide. And so amongst the people that I know, the friends of mine who give me the wink, wink, nudge, nudge, they're like, I respect you even more because you have a swear word on the title of your book, which is, kind of ironic and fun, but at the same time, it really, if you read the book, you understand what we're saying there, and why it's titled that, and it actually is a pretty appropriate title.
Well, so you talked a little bit about the term kind of resonating with people, beforehand, and it was folks that had given you feedback that kind of helped you coin the term for the book. So, but how do you describe like a no BS approach to social media marketing or digital marketing?
I think the no BS approach is one that understands that the philosophical tenets of social media are appropriate and are good to know. And those philosophical tenets are, yes, you need to join the conversation. Yes, you need to provide value to your audience, build relationships over time. Yes, you need to be genuine and honest and open and transparent as a company. But you can't stop there. And sort of the vibe of sort of the calling BS on people is calling BS on the people who stop there and say, that's all there is to it. It's hold hands in a circle and sing Kumbaya with your fans about your brand, which ultimately is BS. And so the no BS version is, yes, all those philosophical tenets are appropriate and they're adequate, and they need to be incorporated into how you approach the marketplace in the social media world. But you also have to think about, how do I approach this strategically? How do I measure this? How does this ladder up to business goals? How am I going to drive revenue? How am I going to measure return, sometimes on investment, which is a mathematical equation? And how am I going to measure the overall return? What else I'm getting out of this, which might be more intangible values as well. And so the no BS approach is to say, let's do away with the fluff and the clutter that sometimes comes from social media consultants and whatnot who don't really understand that we're in the business world here. And when you add the word marketing to the phrase social media, you're talking about business now. And when you talk about that points to the bottom line in terms of revenue, there has to be something that points to the bottom line in terms of customer satisfaction. And there's lots of business drivers that you need to factor into what you're doing. You can't just blog, tweet, and Facebook, hold hands in a circle and sing Kumbaya and go home happy. Because if you have a boss in a real business, they're not going to be happy with just that. They're going to say, what am I getting? What's the return? What kind of money are we driving? How's the revenue? And so you need to answer those questions as well. And so the no BS approach to social media is using it, but using it for a business purpose.
Well, and there are some values and some some characteristics of that kind of kumbaya approach, though, that are there that still have some value in the business world that have there's been a bit of a lack of over the last couple decades, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's no question. And keep in mind, when we call BS on what we refer to in the book as the hippies and tree huggers of social media, and we use that term lovingly, it's not an insult, because Eric and I consider ourselves to be social media purists. We believe in those philosophical tenets. Pardon me. Philosophical tenets are not enough. And so, we try to add the business components to that. However, those philosophical tenets really do root your business if you are approaching social media with those thoughts of joining the conversation, engaging your audience, building relationships and trust over time, et cetera, et cetera. Those are really good best practices for any business in the social media realm. You are ultimately going to become a social business when you learn to be social. And being social means not thinking of yourself first, but thinking of your audience first, which means sometimes you have to put aside sales and leads and revenue and just participate in the conversation. Just join the conversation. It doesn't mean you want to forget about revenue and forget about driving business, but it means in order to have a two-way conversation and some reciprocation from your audience in this space, you have to actually participate without your business goals in mind. And so those philosophical tenets are very important, and you want to keep them in mind, but you also have to keep the business in mind too.
Well, what happens to some of those that say, well, I mean, I'm already doing well right now. I don't have the manpower to now start, engaging more with my folks and so on. So I'm just going to kind of, let that go to those who feel like getting into it, and I'm going to continue straight ahead in the direction that I'm going. I mean, if they are concerned with sales and obviously revenue, do you think that that's going to be detrimental to revenue for those particular individuals over time, and that they really should focus on this emerging route of social business?
I think over time, a business that focuses on, me, and revenue, and doesn't focus on their audience and what their audience needs, what their audience is interested in, ultimately over time, at least in the social media marketing realm, they're going to fail. There's a lot of hollow promises here.
But do you think that those companies will ultimately be missing out on a piece of the pie that will affect the way that they're doing business if they simply don't even step foot into the social realm?
Not necessarily, because I think there's a lot of businesses out there that don't necessarily need social media. For instance, I've got a really good friend of mine who owns a lawn care service in Louisville, Kentucky. And, his wife was all giddy about, hey, Jason knows social media. Why don't you go talk to him and see if he can help you do the Facebook page and the blog and all that good stuff to grow your business. And as a good marketing consultant, not just a social media marketing consultant, I sat down with this guy and I said, okay, where do you get your current customers? How do you acquire customers presently? And he said, quite honestly, the best way that I gain customers is, for instance, when I started cutting the grass in your yard, in your house, 3 of your neighbors came up to me and said, can you cut my grass too? And so I said, okay, I've got your social media strategy wrapped up. Here it is. Put down the damn computer, go to a neighborhood where you don't currently cut anybody's grass and cut somebody's yard for free. That's your strategy right there, because that's a customer acquisition strategy. It's a marketing strategy, and it's going to work. You don't need to build a Facebook page. You don't need to blog. Now, if this guy owned a lawn care company that served 3 or 4 metropolitan areas, and he had 40 or 50 crews, et cetera, I would probably think differently. But for a small business where this guy's got 2 or 3 crews that go out and cut grass, he doesn't need a Facebook page. He needs to go cut more grass, because when he does that, he gets business. And so understand that there's always going to be certain circumstances where social media is not the right avenue for you. There's always going to be instances where businesses don't need a social channel to get the word out about what they're doing. Sometimes advertising is better. Sometimes direct mail is better. Sometimes channel marketing is better, et cetera, et cetera. Social media is just another piece of the puzzle. It's not a better piece. It's not the only piece. It's another piece of the marketing communications puzzle. Yes, it's a little different. Yes, there's a two-way communication, not just a one-way communication. And I would argue there's a multi-way, multi-log going on there between, your customers can talk to you, you can talk to your customers, but your customers can talk to each other and you can watch that conversation too. And so it's a different dynamic, but it's just another channel. It's not some purple dinosaur in the room. It's another way for you to communicate with your crowd.
So rather than purple cow, it's now you got me thinking of Barney. Thanks a lot, Jason.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. I love you. You love me. We're one big happy family. There you go.
and so, that's the importance of having a strategy, right? Is understanding what do you want to get out of it, so that you can then act accordingly. If you identify what you want to get out of it, it can be had from doing what you were just mentioning, for instance, versus having a Facebook page, then you'll identify that early on. But if you just simply take the word of all the hype that might be happening around, some website, Pinterest or Facebook or whatever the hype may be, and you just start throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, you're going to get pissed off because you're spending so much time and energy, even though you may think that it's free, right? I mean, in reality, it's not free. People, especially with businesses, feel that time is money, and there is usually a little bit of time available, on top of all the work you're doing running your business and all this stuff. The last thing you want to be doing is spending all this extra time trying to figure out how to turn tweets into money. Especially without having an actual goal in mind.
Yeah, if you don't approach social media with a goal and objectives and planning to measure what you're getting out of it, et cetera, you're going to be you're just going to be frustrated. And it's like any other area of buy a TV ad, and I'm going to produce a TV ad, and I'm going to put it on television. And you don't really have a goal for what you're going to get out of the TV ad, you're going to be very disappointed with the performance of said TV ad. If your goal is to acquire customers, then you're going to write the ad differently. You're going to position the ad differently. You're going to buy different media times. You're going to have some sort of measurement metric built in to say, hey, come in and mention this TV spot and you're going to get a discount. You're going to have some way of capturing some measurement to know how you did that TV ad. Social media is no different. If you incorporate $20,000 in your budget or $50,000 or whatever it is, and you put that in your budget and you start to think about what you're doing in the social media world and you plan for, okay, what are we going to get out of this? And you say, we're going to put coupons on Facebook, and it's going to be a unique coupon that we can only put on Facebook, and we're going to track it specifically so we know exactly how many people come from Facebook and purchase our service. Then you're going to be happier with the results. And so you have to have goals. You have to approach it strategically, and you have to plan to measure. If you do that, you're going to be a lot happier with what you get out of social media marketing.
Is failing to measure one of the biggest and most common mistakes that businesses make?
Failing to measure is probably the biggest mistake that businesses make in the social media world. They literally say, all right, I want a Twitter account, I want a Facebook account, I want a Facebook page, I want a blog. And you ask them why, and they say, because everyone else has one, or because that's the new hip trend. That's a really stupid reason to have a Facebook page. It's a really stupid reason to have a Twitter account. Your reason should be, I want to drive sales. I want to facilitate customer service. I want to unity around my brand and have an army of advocates online. If you have a goal, then you know what to measure. And if you know what to measure, you're going to be a hell of a lot more satisfied with what you're getting out of it. So I think not understanding what you're trying to do, and therefore not prescribing measurements that you can incorporate into what you're doing to prove that you're doing it or not doing it, is the biggest failure that I think I see in most businesses.
So what do you think over the next year it seems to be the most kind of promising and exciting things and trends that are happening in the social, mobile, local, the digital marketing space in general? Do you see anything just really kind of catching on this year or taking off?
Well, I think there's a lot of interesting tools and tactics and whatnot that are happening out there. I think Pinterest is certainly of interest. I think mobile marketing and now I don't think most businesses are catching on to it, but I do definitely think that that some are, and it's getting better. But I think ultimately, I'm hoping that the trend in social media marketing for all businesses, large and small, is going to become that they're going to stop playing in the sandbox. Strategically, you can set goals, you can plan to measure, and you can accomplish what you're trying to accomplish as a business using social media. If that happens, and all the Pinterests of the world, the mobile marketing, the email marketing, all the different trends and whatnot that are out there will all fall into line with what businesses are trying to accomplish, and they'll be a lot happier with what they're getting out of it. So my hope is that the trend is going to be that people stop using this as a sandbox, stop experimenting, and start using it for a business purpose.
Well, considering that our audience, could potentially be some business owners, but really are the aspiring and kind of in the trenches, social media and digital marketers and such, what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes some of those folks can make? Kind of coming from the same direction as you, in the past, you were doing something very different and then you made your way into the digital marketing realm. There's a lot of people that are trying because they think that it's the hot thing to do, or maybe they do see it as the way to go. And they're honestly trying to trek their way into the digital marketing. What do you think is the worst thing that they could do, in pursuing that?
Well, it's the same answer. The worst thing they could do is not approach it strategically. Not have goals, not have objectives, not understand what they're trying to get out of it. If you approach it without a strategic purpose, you're going to be dissatisfied with the results.
So really understanding how it all ties back, like you said, to business goals and marketing goals.
Absolutely.
Well, cool. Besides the book and besides the consultancy that continues to grow, you mentioned also early on that you speak, of course, and that you are an educator in the sense that not only do you go out and speak and do trainings face to face, but you also have an online community. What made you decide to spend some of your energy in that? And tell us a little bit about exploring-socialmedia.com. The blog and the website is socialmediaexplorer.com, but the community is exploring-socialmedia.com.
Yeah, the real purpose, sort of the mission of Social Media Explorer right now is to make social media marketing and digital marketing more accessible. And we do that with individuals through exploring-socialmedia.com, which is a subscription-based learning community where instead of the typical learning community where you take a bunch of these linear lessons and then at the end there's this forum where you can ask questions of people, we flip that on its head, and now you come in and you can ask questions, whatever your specific questions are about your brand, about your company, about your situation, and digital marketing experts answer your questions. So it's not like LinkedIn where you ask questions and random people answer. It's not like Quora where random people answer your questions. You're going to get qualified digital marketing experts and practitioners who are answering your questions. And then if your question routes to some lesson or some insight that we have on the site, will route you to that. And so it's kind of turning the traditional learning community on its head a bit. And that's a subscription-based community. It's $25 a month, which is very affordable even for individuals and certainly for companies as well. And so we've got a staff of people on hand to answer your questions. We also make social media marketing more accessible by hosting one-day events we call Explore. We did our first one Friday in Dallas, Texas. It was our first of 5 events this year that we're doing. The next one is April 13th in Nashville, Tennessee. We're looking very much forward to having the folks there. And it's, $250 for a one-day intensive, 12 or so speakers and an all-day learning experience that's really going to get you ramped up and focused on using social media marketing and digital marketing strategically. And then we also have a market research product that we're coming out with. And when you typically buy a research report from a company, you're spending, upwards of $1,000, $1,200, $1,500. And our market research reports are going to be focused on specific industries, and they're going to be very cheap compared to what's out there, probably in the $300 to $400 range. So we're making the information and the education that we have to offer more accessible to more people, and that's kind of our mission.
Well, as an author at Social Media Explorer, we get access to exploring-socialmedia.com, your community. And I have to say, I've learned a lot just by even passively being part of that community over there. Because as you say, you're posting content up there in kind of a lesson format, but at the same time, you're able to go ahead and ask these great folks from the community that you have in your network and who have dedicated some time to contributing to the community, and you get answers specifically on questions you have. So if there's questions you specifically have, you don't just have to go and kind of scour any content that's already been created and written from somebody in the community. You can actually ask questions, and sometimes it's not even only the folks that you have brought in and yourself that answer the question. Sometimes it's just other people in the community that have some good input. So I think I have found it very interesting and useful in that case.
Yeah, I mean, I think Adam, you're a great case study there, because you know more about design than I do, and so if someone comes in and asks a question about design, you have a tendency to chime in long before I even get a chance to answer the question. And if Adam, answers the question before I do and answers it better, then I just shut the hell up, because I know better. So it's one of those communities. We've got some SEO experts there. We've got some social media strategists there. We've got some email marketing experts there. And so when you come in and ask a question, we're going to answer your question as best we can. And then if there are resources available to you, we're going to route you to them. It just makes your job as a digital marketing manager for your company, or a social media manager for your company, a lot more easy, because you can say, I don't have time to browse forums and message boards looking for a solution. I'll go to Exploring Social Media and say, hey, here's what I'm trying to do. Here's the problem I'm having. How do I solve it? And you're going to get an answer, for the most part, within a few hours. Sometimes it might take us a day if I'm traveling or something like that to answer your question, but you're going to get a qualified answer, not random schmuck.
Yeah, and you have videos and stuff up there as well, so it's multimedia. Well, I know that you're out here again on the West Coast, up in Seattle, as we were mentioning before. You want to get back to connecting with some folks out there, but I wanted to close up by saying, once again, as somebody who's worked with you, met you in person a number of times, heard you speak, and has been had the opportunity to be one of the writers there at Social Media Explorer over the past couple of years. I'd say I probably learned a lot more from those interactions with you than you probably know, and I wanted to give you credit for really, kind of helping me stay on the right track with the no BS approach, so to speak. I may still have a little ways to go with that, but I appreciate all that you give back, kind of to those of us that are trying to help our clients out and really kind of see this thing through and see how social media can really be leveraged for business and marketing. And, thanks for being on the show.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for contributing to Social Media Explorer. And thank you and Corey for having me. I appreciate you saying that. And I just try to be useful, so when I am, I feel good.
Awesome. Well, we hope to maybe kind of tickle our audience a little bit with maybe a book of yours here, and we'll talk about it a little bit more towards the end of the podcast. But for now, we want to let you get back to the fun out there in Seattle.
Thanks, Adam. Thank you, Corey. Appreciate you guys.
So there you have it. That is the discussion I had earlier there with Jason Falls. And you heard him. He is donating a book to the cause, which we'll talk about in just the end of the show here, on how you can get a copy of the No BS Social Media by Jason Falls and Eric Decker. On that note, Corey, we want to dive into just kind of a couple interesting links that we have for the week and discuss those a little bit, huh?
Yeah, definitely. And first up, had a couple of interesting follow-up links to last week's episode. Last week we took a deep dive into Pinterest, and Adam, it seems like since that episode you've really been bitten hard by the Pinterest bug and have been pinning quite a bit of great content, which is nice to see. That's sort of how it goes. I think that's part of why everybody said, "Oh, I'm addicted to Pinterest." It's an addicting site and it'll get you. So have you been, what's your experience over the last couple of weeks with Pinterest been? How's it going?
I don't know. I think initially I didn't take the time to see clearly how I wanted to personally use it, for myself. And then eventually, after seeing how you were using it and seeing how others that I'm connected to were using it, I started to kind of go, I get what I want to do with this now. And it just starts to kind of, you start falling into Pinterest. It's kind of like you've made it your own. in a way. So there's been, for instance, it's a place now where I collect a lot of food stuff, so that I can cook. And in fact, I did cook a simple recipe I found on Pinterest. I think it was this last weekend. Go take a look at my food one. I have two food boards. I have I think it's a beautiful food presentation, which is just generally stuff that I'll likely never be able to present, like the beautiful food, the way it's plated and everything. But then the other one is just simply food, where it's all this stuff that I think is looks awesome, stuff I'd love to cook and eat and everything. And so there's one that has bell peppers, where you slice the bell peppers into rings, stick it on a pan. And then crack your egg into that, and you basically cook the egg sunny side up inside this nicely shaped bell pepper ring. So it's super easy to do. I did it off. I found it on Pinterest and went ahead and cooked it. But in kind of thinking about it a little bit more strategically, or kind of from the marketing perspective, like we did last week, it really kind of lit a fire under me and inspired me to look at things in a little bit differently. And in fact, we talked about it last week, the blog post that I had, to just understand how popular Pinterest is right now. The post is on Social Media Explorer, and it's called three ways to use Pinterest for marketing research. And the thing's got like over 1,000 shares on social networks, and it's been out for exactly 1 week.
Wow.
And that's far more than most of my other posts that have been on Social Media Explorer. But for the most part, I mean, I think that it just has to do with people who see Pinterest as this, or at least are hearing the hype about it being this next big thing, and therefore they're gravitating towards anything that says anything about marketing with it. And so they've just been continuously. I kind of always, I don't know about you, but when I do a blog post, I always save a bunch of searches for the link and so on, and all the different social networks, and I go back intermittently and see how many shares there have been on all the major social networks. So for instance, there's been like close to 300 on LinkedIn and almost 700 on Twitter, and so on. And it's just been pretty amazing. And I think it has very little to do with my writing, and more to do with, quite honestly, the content related to the one of the hottest topics out there right now, which is Pinterest.
No, I wouldn't sell yourself short, Adam. I think, like I said last week, it was actually a really interesting article and kind of a new take on Pinterest that I haven't really seen out there. So sure, there's a ton of articles floating around Pinterest, but from what I've seen, a lot of them tend to kind of repeat the same knowledge and aren't exactly breaking any new ground. But I thought your look at ways for using Pinterest for marketing research and knowledge was actually a pretty unique take on it. And so I'm not surprised to see it getting some traction.
Well, I hope to have a follow-up pretty soon. There's a little experiment that I did that just is going to take some time to kind of get all the data back together, that I kind of let something float out there on Pinterest, and did a couple things with it. And I don't know if I shared it with you first, but maybe I'll share it with you offline. And I'm hoping that I'll turn that into an interesting blog post to in the near future, related to Pinterest and marketing again.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I'd love to take a look at that. And we can probably stick a link to that in the show notes as well. Let the listeners check it out. And
so what's the link we have this week on Pinterest?
So yeah, I was going to say a couple of other people that have been experimenting with Pinterest and things that sort of caught my eye. And, I think part of what I like to do when I'm learning the ins and out of a new network is look at interesting ways that people are kind of testing the boundaries and experimenting and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't work. And a couple different things caught my eye. And the first was a user named Nick McGlynn. Nick McGlynn, who, just another user that's using Pinterest in a unique way. And what he's doing is turning the board thumbnails, so the collection of different pins that show. And for those of you that haven't used Pinterest, when you create a new board, it takes the last 9 images and displays those as sort of a preview of what that board is. And so he actually took an image and cut it into 9 parts and then loaded it into the board in order so that when you view his profile, it just shows a single image split up into 9 sections. And we've seen people do similar hacks with things like when Facebook first allowed you to put a row of images across the top of your page. People created these similar kind of montage images, and I think Google Plus has been used to the same effect. So interesting to see that continue and get used in Pinterest as well. I think the effect is kind of cool. It's obviously something you'd have to play around with to get the most use out of, but he did something cool, which was put his logo on there and split that into 9 parts. And, it's basically an interesting way of developing out your profile a little bit so that when somebody lands on there, they say, oh, that's cool. This guy's doing something new and different, so I should probably follow him and see what else he's up to.
Yeah, there was an article on Mashable that talked about a number of other folks that were doing this, and they called it hacks as well. And I mean, I guess I guess you consider it a hack. I was kind of, the title made me expect something a little bit more extravagant. But I think it's cool. I think he's actually probably used it a little bit more creatively than some of the other folks that I've seen doing this. And at least he has one real board, because a lot of the folks that I've seen have their whole entire Pinterest account is basically these images, and nobody is like repinning them or any of that kind of stuff. So it's almost like you might as well just have photos. You know what I mean? Like, it might as well just be a regular photo album, because
Right.
they're not leveraging anything more than just simply going, oh, I can take 9 tiles and I can turn it into one big picture. But what I found even more interesting was what the other individual that you shared that link where it says why I want to work at Pinterest.
Right.
I think that's awesome.
So, and this is a combination of things that really caught my eye. So one is, it's actually, and I guess I can talk about it on the show, since I actually emailed this issue to Pinterest, which is when you create a group board, it's opt out, not opt in. So if I create a group board, I can add any Pinterest user to that board as a contributor to the board. And rather than sending them an email and saying, hey, do you want to participate in this board? It will show up on your profile, yes or no. It just automatically drops it into their profile and then sends that person an email and says, hey, you've been added to this board, and, click here to remove yourself. But between when they get added and if they eventually remove themselves, it just shows up on their public profile. So I was actually looking at the pins of Evan Sharp, who's one of the co-founders of Pinterest. And I was just, looking at how he's using the site and the types of content that he's pinning. And at the very bottom of his profile, I saw this board called Why I Want to Work at Pinterest. And I was like, well, that's a weird board to have. Like, he's the co-founder of Pinterest. Why is this on there? So I clicked through, and what it is it's a board filled with images that were all pinned by this guy named Scott McDowell. And what I'm assuming is that he did, like I said, he created a group board and then added both Evan Sharp and Ben Silberman, the 2 co-founders of Pinterest, to the board. So it automatically sends them an email, it, alerts them, it adds it to their profile, and it's basically him applying to work at Pinterest. So he's got things on there like, an icon that's the almost empty battery from the iPhone, and it says, because I'm a pinaholic and I've killed the battery on all my devices, back soon, must charge something. And surprisingly, this board's actually getting quite a bit of response. That pin right there has 6 likes and 18 repins. He's got a picture of chocolate, and each piece of chocolate has the Pinterest logo on it. It says, because it's simply addictive, and that one has 43 repins and 20 likes. So he's actually getting some response on these pins. It's yet to be
telling
seen.
a story with it, right?
Exactly. He's telling a story. He's then, basically sent that story to the 2 co-founders of Pinterest. And he's using it, like you said, to tell a story, to tell, gather up a bunch of reasons why he thinks he's a good candidate to work at Pinterest, and done so in kind of an interesting way, with adding other people to a group board and, using the comments to talk about himself rather than the pin. So, I think both of these are good examples of people who looked at the overall Pinterest as a service and said, let's think outside the box a little bit. How do I get creative with this? How do I make Pinterest as a service suit my needs and the things that I want to do as a user? And I think that's something that businesses should be willing to do so as well, to kind of look at this and say, hey, I'm a photography business and these little icons don't really do my photography justice. How do I make it show up larger on my profile? Or, I'm a wedding consultant and I really want to create a board that sells my services. So rather than just pinning things related to weddings, maybe I do, similar to what Scott has done, and pin kind of reasons you would want to hire me or something like that, and really, working within the framework, but doing so in a creative way.
And I think, I mean, this to me is far more interesting than the little, so-called hacks that people are doing so far. I mean, the way that he's telling the story, I think so far my observations have been that on Pinterest, people are grossly underutilizing the caption elements.
Yep.
I think they're kind of caught up in just hurrying up and repinning something. And I'll say even myself, when I repin something, I don't necessarily have the time to go and recaption things. But if I were a marketer if I were using this strictly for marketing rather than the personal use that I've been doing so far, I would definitely pay attention to that. And in fact, kind of what I alluded to earlier about kind of doing some experimentation does have to do with, how I use the caption as well, the description as well as the image. So I think that's one of the smartest things, because I mean I don't even have to go into the pin. I can kind of look at it right now, and in fact I did dive into a couple of his pins just because I was interested to see what it was saying more close up. But from even that 10,000 foot view that you have when you just dive directly into the board and not yet into the pin, you can see the whole story kind of taking shape. Obviously, much better actually than if you were to dive into one particular image on its own. But each of the images stand out on its own in a way because of that caption. So if it does end up getting repinned, for instance, I mean, I'm looking at this one that he created. It says, "I pin because it makes me happy." It's part of this board, but it also stands alone on its own. And has received 11 likes, 3 comments, and 24 repins. And 24 repins is a good amount of repins for just for one image. I don't know about you, but most of the time it's usually under a half dozen for just kind of the average image that's on Pinterest that I've seen.
Right. Yeah, and I think a lot of that action is probably due to the fact that, like I said, it's showing up on the profile of both the co-founders of Pinterest, both of which have nearly 1 million followers on the site, and so they're getting a lot of traffic to their profiles and people browsing their boards. So a lot of it's probably coming from that versus the direct followers of Scott. But hey, credit to him; he's using it in an interesting way and getting good results from that. So.
Yep. It's kind of like those folks that I've seen other folks want to get jobs at Google, for instance, and kind of play around with the algorithm a little bit in order to get noticed from Google. Or those, have you seen the ones that used Facebook ads to either get a job on Facebook, or I think it might have been to advertise towards to the folks that were on that work at Mashable.
Yep. Yeah, I've seen everything from people creating entire Tumblr blogs to ask for a job at Tumblr to, like you said, using Google and Facebook's ad platform to ask for jobs at Google and Facebook to now we can add Pinterest to that list. So inevitably, when there's a new service, somebody's going to use that service to try to apply for a job at that service. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but always interesting to see when somebody does that.
I think this one will work. Give them a job.
Like I said, it'll be interesting to see if it works. It is a unique way of using the site. So if they're looking for somebody that thinks outside the box, maybe they'll pick them up.
Yep.
So another kind of outside the box use for Pinterest was a platform called Styled By, and this was created by Gap for New York Fashion Week. And basically what they did is created an online catalog, but they optimized each image within the catalog for sharing on social sites like Facebook and like Pinterest. They actually have Pinterest as one of the options. Did you get a chance to check this out, Adam?
Yeah. So you were kind of talking about how they were connecting with bloggers and so on to create this. What I found kind of the most interesting kind of learning point for businesses is really how they optimize each of the sharing experiences that you were talking about. So when you go to an image and it has in a lot when you go to an average website, normally they'll have a piece of content, and that piece of content will have a number of share buttons. So if you go to a blog or something on a website, it just has just these general share buttons. What I find is that most companies, most businesses that go that route and just simply slap those things on don't really optimize the experience properly for each of the different networks that you're sharing the particular piece of content on. And these guys on the site have done it really, really well, where they've taken it, and when it goes out on Facebook, it takes a very specific image, which is a little bit different than what it would do on, say, Pinterest. And because the type of what do you want to say? So like the caption and the link and all that other data is different for each of those networks. It's not exactly the same across all of those networks. So even, for instance, Twitter, which doesn't allow you to post, well, it does actually let you post images, but not in this fashion. You have to upload an image directly to Twitter, or you have to be part of their little API group so that your image will then show up, like, if you're using Instagram or something like that. But ahead of the podcast, I went ahead and clicked on each of them and found how they kind of optimized each of the messages for the medium in order to really kind of grab people's attention. And that part of that is understanding what is possible when you use each of the networks and when you share a particular piece of content. And then the other is, who are the users that are there, and what kind of message do they respond to? What makes them want to click on something and check it out? And when you can kind of put those two pieces together and think about that with the type of content you're allowing folks to share, it really optimizes the response that you get, the reaction that you get from sharing that content. And I find that most folks do not take that into account when they, slap some share stuff onto something on their website.
Right. And I think this actually addresses something that you brought up earlier, which is the fact that a lot of users don't really either take the time or care to customize the text that they're sharing. So, for instance, the text that goes along with the Pinterest share, users are typically just, giving a very brief description, or sometimes they'll just ignore that text entirely. So Gap has taken that as an opportunity to put their own spin on it and put their own verbiage out there. And like you said, it's customized to each of the networks. So when it's shared on Twitter, they've got to use less words, so they're more careful with the words that they do choose. Place like Facebook and place like Pinterest gives them a little more space, so they can be a little more verbose with their language. But, it doesn't override the ability for somebody who does enjoy taking the time to craft their own description to overwrite the existing description and add their own. But for those users that just, they're collecting images, they're pinning it, and whatever text happens to go along with that, it's giving Gap an opportunity to insert their own copy and the copy that supports their overall campaign. And I think that's a very smart use of that sharing system. Not to mention the fact that they've gone through and taken a very visual catalog, and when you get a chance to take a look at this thing, it's got a lot of images and there's a lot going on, but they've picked out very specific elements of it that they think a user might want to share and made that the shareable image. So you're highlighting the parts that you want to highlight and not overwhelming people with, making too many decisions around, well, what of this do I want to share? How do I make the image look good? They've done all that work for you and made the process really smooth.
And it's mobile ready. I mean, I was a little scared when I first clicked the link and wanted to bring it up on my iPad, and they made it nice and easy to navigate with my iPad, which is pretty important to take that into consideration when designing something that's highly interactive, such as the brochure that they did.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. So another story that popped up that I feel like a lot of people probably saw this, but I still figured it would be a good discussion topic, was Twitter opening up their advertising platform to small businesses. So, I'm sure at this point most people are probably familiar with Twitter's existing ad platform where brands can sponsor tweets. They can sponsor specific tweets, or they can sponsor broader hashtags that then go into trending topics. But up until now, it was really designed for brands that had larger budgets. They had, upwards of six-figure marketing budgets. They were working directly with Twitter salespeople to get these platforms in place. It wasn't really open to the mom and pop shops that didn't have the type of budget it takes to call Twitter directly and have somebody, on the phone to help you walk through it. But now they've actually announced that they're opening up their self-serve ad platform. And as part of that announcement, they actually partnered with American Express to give $100 worth of free advertising to the first 10,000 businesses that sign up. And, $100 in free advertising, that's a great opportunity to jump on. But what this signaled to me is that they're aiming wide with this thing. They think that, there are a number of businesses, a number of types of businesses, all ranges of sizes and audiences that are going to be looking at Twitter as a new channel for their advertising. And what this means is that, if you're in one of those, if you're part of one of those businesses that now says, okay, it's time to get involved in Twitter and it's time to do some advertising on that network, you have to consider the fact that you're now part of a group of, at least 10,000 other businesses that are also looking to do the same. So you need to be, smart about the advertising that you're putting out there and making sure that you're approaching it not just as I can finally do it, let's just throw a message up there, but approach it strategically and approach it, in a way that says, all right, well, I'm going to test this out. I'm going to get some learnings and I'm going to make sure that I'm, working within the Twitter system the way that it's intended to be used instead of just trying to slap an existing campaign on it. Is this something that you might be checking out, Adam, using Twitter advertising for any of your clients?
I definitely think it will be, primarily because it's so I hasten to say it's so different than, say, doing the standard, the social ads that you find on Facebook, and even LinkedIn has those, and this is almost akin to a social AdWords in a way, where it's going to be primarily text and a link, and it's going to be a little scary. Like you said, they're shooting a little wide on that, right? So the amount of folks that they're trying to get signed up, I mean, you're going to really be kind of competing for those niche trends and keywords and things like that, and then you'll be bidding on that stuff, very similar to an AdWords on Google. I know that, for instance, as I was monitoring that blog post that I had on Social Media Explorer about Pinterest, that I have it on a saved search on Twitter. At the very top of the page is something completely unrelated that somehow is, taking up the keyword related to what I'm talking about. And I don't know whether it's one of the keywords or the entire string or what it is. Maybe it's just related to Pinterest. And there's somebody that is sponsoring the top tweet on my saved search. And so you can imagine there's going to be people vying for kind of owning and bidding and paying more for all these particular keywords and topics that will be popping up on Twitter. And I don't know. I guess maybe it's not going to get too scary, because currently you have just a narrow group, a narrow field of folks that are out there bidding on that. I think maybe you'll end up seeing a little bit more variety, but it definitely will be an interesting thing once it starts coming, getting out there in the wild with all of these small and mid-sized businesses. It's been kind of out of the reach due to costs for quite some time, and I feel like Twitter has been really late on the ball with allowing small businesses and even medium-sized businesses to jump on board and do some effective advertising using their platform, because they kind of talk about it in their blog post, as you'll link to in the show notes, where they say, successful small business owners intuitively know how to build meaningful relationships with their customers. They were the first to use Twitter to talk with consumers in real time, and their creativity demonstrated Twitter's potential as a marketing platform. It's like they're throwing it back to the small businesses and saying, you guys are awesome. You guys were the first ones to do this. You guys, but yet but Twitter were like, it has been late in kind of helping them out with any real tools.
Right.
Um, and so at any rate, I think they've been a little late to the ball, to the game, but it'll be interesting to go back to the simple question you asked. Yes, I believe that I will be recommending this to the right customers, and I'll probably be doing some experimenting as we talk, and many of the shows about our accidental motto of always be experimenting. I think that what should initially happen, definitely the day that the thing is launched and made available to me or to anybody else, one of my clients, is to just try to test things out and see what might be appropriate to them and for their goals and see what comes of it.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see how they work the bidding system, the prioritization of which advertisers get to show which message, because I know with Facebook and Google and the like, it's really whoever's the highest bidder for specific search terms or for specific interests, their ad gets to be shown. So Twitter, it'll be interesting to see if it's a time-based thing or if it's really just comes down to who's bidding the most for the keyword, or if you're just purely buying impressions. I think a lot of those details they didn't really dive into, or at least I haven't come across yet. So it'll be interesting to follow up with this and see how the platform actually builds out. But they're making strides and they're finally opening it up. So definitely something to keep an eye on if you've been actively itching for the chance to dive into Twitter and do some advertising there.
And just to quickly tack on the end of that, they also announced that pretty soon they're likely going to be launching the business pages, the Twitter business pages for businesses. I mean, similar to a Google business page or Google brand page or a Facebook business page. They're going to be doing that for Twitter as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if this somewhat coincides with that kind of broader release, and that they possibly try to coax folks into having their ads linked directly back to their own Twitter pages, to kind of increase that presence rather than say drive somebody to a landing page off on a elsewhere. So it'll be an interesting. It sounds like 2012 might be the year that Twitter really kind of publicly opens up in a lot of ways to businesses, much broader than they have in the past. And the trend has been, that a lot of these companies initially try to go really, really hard on customer service and developing relationships with large brands, enterprise brands. Foursquare did the same thing. And then Foursquare has been talking about and been slowly kind of rolling out the self-serve model for small businesses as well. And I think that's likely part of the reason why it's taken Twitter so long. But Twitter has just been still, with the resources they have and so on, they've just taken a little bit too long in my mind. But it's not like they're gonna implode and dissolve away anytime soon. So better late than never, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so actually had some follow-up that wanted to share. This is our first follow-up from an earlier episode, and this was the CEO of Arctan actually reached out following our second screen episode. Arctan was one of the companies that we had mentioned, and Raul Agarwal, and I apologize if I just butchered his name, Raul Agarwal, reached out and just wanted to clarify a couple things regarding Arctan. I think towards the end of the episode I had mentioned that there was some sort of connection between Arctan and Echo, because we had brought Echo up as well. And so he just wanted to clarify. So I'll go ahead and read the email that I received, just so we can make sure that we address it and are clear about Arctan's role in the whole process. So his email said, to clarify, Arctan products use Echo as a database. The aggregation of the social data is done by Arctan, so the data comes via Arctan. Also, deep curation of the real-time social streams is done by Arctan. So is interaction and conversations on the social streams. We use cloud vendors as necessary, including Amazon EC2 for servers and Echo for database. So, I think that I probably overstated Echo's role. It sounds like Echo provides some of the back end, but really Arctan is doing a lot of the data analysis and reporting. So just thought that was a good thing to clarify. And, they're, again, one of those companies that's doing some interesting work in the second screen space, and look forward to see what else they put out there.
And we appreciate you reaching out to us, and hope that if there's any other CEOs or any of those other folks out there that are hearing what we're talking about and want to provide their 2 cents afterwards, then send it on our way, and we'll take a look at it and see if we can include it in the show here. So thanks, Raul. Right?
Yes.
Awesome. Cool.
All right. And I think, Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you mentioned earlier that we have a copy of Jason's book to give away. Is that correct?
Yes. Jason, we got his voice recorded, and he has committed on tape to giving a book away here for the Solo Mo Show podcast. And so we were trying to kind of think a little bit about what would be the right way to do this. And I think what we're going to do probably, right, is the next show we will announce the winner. But what we'd like you to do is to send us a tweet, and the Twitter account that we're asking you to send us a tweet to, Corey, right, is the Solo Mo Show Twitter account.
You can either send a tweet directly to the Solo Mo Show, or if you just want to share it with a broader audience, feel free to just tweet it as a normal tweet. But what we'd like is to hear what your favorite or best example of no BS marketing is. So if you got a chance to listen to the interview with Jason, you'll understand what that term means. And we'd love to hear from the listeners and see if you, while you were listening to that, thought of, this campaign or this effort from a company that I saw seems to really fit that idea of no BS marketing. So if you have something that kind of falls into that bucket, feel free to share it via Twitter. It can be a link. You can explain it a little bit, but make sure to tag it with hashtag #NoBS and hashtag SoloMoShow. And that way we can do a search for those and find all of the various links that you guys send. What we'll do is we'll just take a look through those and pick one that seems like it would be good to share during next week's episode. And if we pick yours and share it on the show, you'll win a free copy of Jason's book. So that's awesome.
Corey, I'd like to put one more rule on that. So besides using those 2 hashtags, I think that they should also be following Solo Mo Show on Twitter as well.
I second that rule. That sounds like a good addition.
All right, so we'll make sure that we look at those hashtags and the tweets that you send, but we're going to also check if you're following Solo Mo Show on Twitter.
That sounds good.
So are we about ready to wrap up, my man?
Yeah, I think we can wrap this one up. Been a good episode. Loved having Jason on. Want to thank him. For those that want to reach Jason, you can check out his writing at socialmediaexplorer.com. Or feel free to reach him on Twitter at Jason Falls. And as always, if you want to reach us, we would definitely appreciate that. We'd love hearing from the listeners. So you can find us at Solo Mo Show on Twitter, or you can reach us directly. I'm at Corey O'Brien, and Adam can be reached at Secret Sushi. We also have the Solo Mo Show page on Google+. So if you're a active Google+ user, just go ahead and search for Solo Mo Show, and we'll pop right up there. And if you have a comment or question that you want to submit via email, we'd be happy to get it that way as well. So you can reach us via email at solomoshow@gmail.com. That's solomoshow@gmail.com. And as always, all the links that we discussed today, as well as links to our social channels that we just mentioned, will be included in the show notes. And you can view those by going to solomoshow.com and clicking on the appropriate episode, or they should also be available in your preferred podcast player of choice. So take a look at those, and hopefully that's a good resource for anybody that enjoyed what we talked about but wanted to take a look at the specific links that we referenced. And as always, we encourage everybody to feel free to get in touch, ask us questions, suggest topics, give feedback, or even just to say hi. We want to hear from you and hear what you think of the show, and hear if you have any suggestions for improvements, or even If we happen to slip up and misdescribe something like we did with Arctan, we'd love to hear that and correct it on a future episode. So that's always appreciated. And
feel free to go to iTunes and like us. No, that's the wrong network there. Go to iTunes and rate us, please. If you listen to the podcast and you subscribe via iTunes, please go ahead, give us a few stars on there, preferably 5 if you like the show. And that obviously helps us get found by others, helps people trust the podcast and take the dive into the world of the Solo Mo show and listen to it. So please, go over there and give us a little rating and leave us some kind words in the comment. We appreciate it.
All right. Well, anything else you wanted to cover today, Adam, or should we call this one a wrap?
I think this is a wrap.
That sounds good. We will see you guys next week. Thanks.
Take care.